My name is Shane, and I started reading books again back in January. Well, I wouldn't say I haven't really been reading books. I've been reading I don't know, like stories on Wattpad or like Casey Ayonzo says, Wattpad. Nah, I've been reading stories on Tumblr, erotic stuff, like real scandalous. I don't know, but the sex part's like the story works its way up to the sex parts, and then when it gets to the sex, I get bored, and I was just like, I can't read that. I'm bored. I've read enough sex in my life, so I skip that. I just like the foreplay of it, you know. But that's besides the point. I just got back to reading books in January. Not to say that I wasn't reading books on Wattpad, but they weren't always edited and they weren't always good. Um, and same could be said about Ready Player One. It's just as bad, but it's not really. I don't know. I didn't hate it when I read it, but I only read it because I saw the trailer that came out for Comic Con, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to see that. In seeing the trailer, I decided I want to read the book before I watched the movie. So I read that in January and had a good time. I enjoyed reading it because I enjoyed the world. I did notice the problematic things, like whole description of how of a woman, like of a black woman. It felt weird. Then like Ernest Klein wrote stuff like I don't know about trans people, and it was kind of weird. And I was just kind of like, okay, girl. I mean, I don't want to be too offended or nothing, but at the same time, it's like, the fuck. So I read that, and it kind of just made me want to read more books. And BookTube kind of made me just want to read more books. I enjoyed it. I saw the movie. I enjoyed that too. After that, I went and got some other books, but then I decided to revisit some of my old books. Technically, the Santangelo saga. Because let me tell you, I read this back in high school because I wanted to read about like scandalous drama shit, like sex and just like lots of sex, but scandalous drama and shit. So I read this in high school, and it was like back in high school I loved reading long books, like a long, full, dramatic, multiple characters, multiple storylines kind of story. So this had that, and it had the drama and the sex, and it was like and it was like the mafia and just drama and people dying. So I read that. I enjoyed it a lot. But now that I reread it, I was kind of like, oh, I don't really like it. I mean, it's not that I didn't like it as much. What I didn't like was it's like about Gino Santangelo, but I didn't like his parts. I liked Carrie's parts because Carrie's parts were interesting. Some of Carrie's parts were a little torture porn, but they were good. It was good. Hers was more interesting because like she was a black woman that like went through a lot when she was young to the point that like so let me break it down. In the story, it's about Gino Santangelo, or at least it starts with Gino Santangelo, which it's and let me tell you the thing about Gino. In the beginning of the book, because I don't know, this is like some reprint or something. So in it, Jackie Collins says that sometimes when she goes to the airport, it'll have like these women that come up to her and they're like, oh, Jackie, where can I meet a man like Gino? And she's like, only in my head, darling. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So reading it again and the nostalgia of being in high school, I'm thinking like, oh yeah, you know, Gino was that man. He was that dude. He was handling business or whatever, you know. He was the flyest and the finest. And after reading this book, I was like, I don't really like Gino that much. And all these women who are like, where can I find a man like Gino? I'm like, girl, for what? He ain't that fine. I mean, he aight. I guess he's aight from how she wrote it, but I'm like, that's just not my type. But it's like, at the same time, it's like he was real misogynistic. I don't know. He was just real. He was like kind of an asshole. I mean, for the most part, he was pretty cool. But at the same time, he was kind of a shitty person. He treated women badly, like quite a few women. Like there was one girl that he hooked up with, and granted, she was kind of a bitch. But at the same time, it's kind of like he marries her daughter. He marries her daughter, and he's like in love with her. It's just like that was a fucking mess, and he was a mess. But I like Carrie's story better because Carrie's story, although it started off like torture porn because she got born into the world in messy circumstances, and then after that there was like a spot of light for her, and then it's like in her early teens she gets pulled away from the good, from like living a good life, and then she ends up in a torture porn scene, like, and not like a literal torture porn, like basically Jackie Collins wrote part of her life as torture porn because at 13 she ends up in like just this really bad situation, and then it goes on for like quite a while and she goes through a lot, and then it's like I'm thinking like at the end of that, like, oh, she's probably like, 16, 17, 18 at that point. Oh no, it was just like a year in her life. It was just a really terrible year for her. At that, because she's went through a lot of these hardships, it also kind of showed growth in her character. Carrie's parts are great. Lucky's parts are great. Because Lucky's amazing. And Lucky was even better in this book. She was more interesting. She was just like more fun. Her dad was boring-ish. Oh, he was something. He was alright. He wasn't that great. He wasn't that awesome. But in this book, it was pretty cool. I mean, it could have been cut in half because Jackie basically kind of like rehashed portions of this book in this book, and I was a little irritated with that because I was like, girl, if I need like, I mean, I get it. In between time these were published, it would make sense that you kind of rehash that book so you don't have to reread the first book to get to this one. But at the same time, I was like, girl, I just read that. I could have just read this. But I mean, this has more detail, so whatever she rehashed, you'd still need more detail. But this was a good book. I liked it, and it actually made me kind of wanna go ahead and read the other books in the Santangelo saga, because I think the next one is like Lucky's Vengeance, or something like that. So it's gonna be really good. I'm considering reading it, but not right now. I'm just not in the mood. We will get to what I'm currently finishing up and on to next. I went on to read The Invisible Life. Read that again because I hadn't read this since high school, and I just felt like, oh, let's revisit it. And it was cool or whatever. I liked it, but I kind of didn't because maybe I just wasn't in the mood for it. But at the same time, I didn't like Raymond, so there's that. Yeah, basically, I don't like Raymond that much. He was alright, but I don't know, I guess for the circumstances of the time, because it's set in the late 80s, early 90s, it gave me a lot of time to kind of reflect on what the 80s was like, especially for black gay men, or at least black same-gender loving men. And they have to deal with no cell phones, HIV and AIDS, going out to bars to meet people. There's no Grindr. It made me just think of like what that time was like in the 80s and 90s, because technically I am old enough to know what it's like to not grow up with a cell phone, but I'm also living in a time where I know what it's like to have a cell phone and a computer and all these things. So yeah, that's all I could think about with this book, because I forgot half of the story that happened in here. It was like just him and, I don't know, awakening his love of sex with men, or just men in period, or I don't know. He fell in love with a man. At the end of the book, he started off straight and then he ended up gay. It wasn't bad. I'm considering reading the next book, but I don't care. I don't care right now. Maybe next year, maybe later, maybe in a different mood. We will see. The book I read after that was The Chocolate War, because I decided after watching someone's booktube video. No. I was watching Lindsay, what's her name? Gosh, I forgot her name. But Nostalgia Chick. Lindsay the Nostalgia Chick. I don't know, formerly Nostalgia Chick. She's doing this PBS, like she's hosting this PBS web series thing about books, I guess. But in that one, she talked about like YA books, and she brought up the Chocolate War and just kind of like YA through the years. So the Chocolate War came up in it, along with God, Are You There? It's Me. God, I forgot her name. Either way, she brought up that book. And I think The Outsiders too. I'm gonna read that in time. But she brought this book up, so I was like curious about it, and it's a cool book. I guess it was probably more controversial or more I wouldn't say scandalous or controversial. It may be a lot more edgy at the time because it didn't really have books like this. Because technically, this book was more like it's about not conforming. It's about not conforming to what society thinks that you should do. People forcing what they want you to do and their beliefs on you, and if you defy them, you face heavy penalties and brute force for it. Something like that. But it was a really good book. I just think it was still also too quiet for my taste. Because me, I love a scandalous book. That's why I like Jackie. Jackie gives me some scandal and some drama. She gives me good characters and she gives me great plot, everything, all of that. But this is more the protagonist kind of deal with the repercussions of his actions for not going along with the chocolate sale. So then it turned into a chocolate war. But now that I think back at it, it wasn't that much of a war. I mean, it was kind of a war, but basically it was like about bullying. But it was a good book, but it wasn't as juicy and as scandalous as I thought it was gonna be. I thought it was gonna be real, like, ass kicking. People are just like, it was just gonna be crazy. It's gonna be on some Stephen King shit, maybe. But not really. Along with that book, I bought this book. I bought The Book Thief, and I bought The Kite Runner and The Alchemist because I just watched some YouTube videos and I was like, oh my gosh, I should read those books because I've seen quite a few bookshelves with The Book Thief on it, and I remembered The Book Thief had a movie, and I remember The Kite Runner had a movie, so I was like, I kind of want to watch both those movies and read both those books. But I've heard great things about The Book Thief. So I was like, I'm gonna read it. And I have read it. It took me like a month to read it. This book is very long. But oddly enough, it's not that long, really. Thing about this book is it has like, for the most part, short chapters, short, easy chapters. So you just kind of like read a chapter and you can go on and read another, and you don't feel like you're drudging through like one long chapter and you're like, oh my gosh, this chapter's not done yet, these scenes aren't done yet, like what the fuck. It's kind of like the Chocolate War, not as much drama and scandal. I'm not sure I like the author's way of writing, because sometimes he wrote things in this very like poetic way that almost kind of like threw me off from understanding what he was talking about. It wasn't really so much poetic. He described a door as a wall of wood or something like that. It was just like he described it in a way that kind of threw me off from like catching exactly what it was initially. And I kind of get that because I was telling someone that and they were like, well, you know, I don't really like books where they're kind of like just flat out saying, oh, it's a door. But I'm like, in context of the situation, it's like if someone's standing in front of a door and they're about to knock the door, just kind of say that they're gonna knock the door. But I was kind of giving it a little bit more nuance. Sometimes he just did it and I was just like, just tell me it's a door, or just tell me it's a table, or just say that they're angry, because I feel like that's a little extra, because it kind of threw me off. It's a really great coming of age story. I don't know, and it was an interesting. And it was an interesting framing device that went into this book, like using death as a framing device, as a narrator. I wouldn't even say a framing device. Like death is a narrator, and it was interesting. It was a long read. I would reread this book. I would definitely reread this book. It's got its light, happy moments, and it's also got like really dark, dour moments. But at the same time, with the dour moments, probably because of where I'm at right now in my life, I'm not as into the dour. I wouldn't say I'm not as into the dour. Like I didn't feel the dour moments. Like I got that that was sad. Something was sad, but it's just that I'm not in the mood to feel that deeply, or like tears run down my. Because there's like coming down to the end, it gets real heavy, and I was just like, oof, child, this is heavy. But at the same time, I wasn't crying, but I understood and acknowledged that it was heavy and sad. For the most part, I'm done with the story right now because it is the third special anniversary, 30th. Well, it's not 30th edition. It's like special anniversary edition. There are like author's notes and stuff, and his feedback. Well, I wouldn't say his feedback, but his notes on his notes, or at least his essays on his notes. So it's interesting to read. And also, basically, as a writer, it's interesting to see his process in writing this book because it's giving me insight on how to write for me as a writer going forward in projects that I'm writing. It's interesting to see his process. Also, I battered this book too, like in my bag. I mean, the bag wasn't that crazy or nothing, but at the same time, it's a tote bag, and a lot of stuff is just knocking around in it. So this book got a little battered. This was cuter before, and I was like a little raggedy, but it's cute or whatever. It still look good or whatever. It still holds up. It shows that I read this book and I took time to read it, and it wasn't just like coddling and nursing the book. Now that I'm done with that book, the next book I'm gonna read is The Hate You Give. And I'm going to read The Hate You Give mainly because the movie's about to come out. Right now it's September 2018, and it's going to be October 2018 when this movie comes out. But I'm definitely gonna go see the movie, but I wanted to read the book first. But I did not plan to read this book so soon because seriously, after The Book Thief, it was gonna be The Kite Runner, then The Alchemist, then Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, then Children of Blood and Bone, and then probably this. But then I was also thinking, maybe not Children of Blood and Bone, then it would have been The Ember and the Ashes. I don't know, we gonna see what I do next. Then I was also thinking Shadow and Bone, because I really, because I keep hearing so many great things about Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. So like, I really want to get through, I want to start reading the Grisha trilogy and then move on to the Six of Crows duology. So I definitely want to read those. And I wanted to read The Darkest Minds too, but I heard the movie was not really that great. So I was like, I could hold off on reading The Darkest Minds. I could read that later. I'll get like in a superhero mood and read like Vicious and The Darkest Minds because they're kind of superhero-y because it's like people with powers. But it's not like superheroes, it's just like they have powers, and I like that. I love those stories. So I would definitely read those. I'm gonna read this next. I haven't started yet. I will also finish reading the author notes from Marcus Zusak from The Book Thief, and probably like read like a chapter or a page or a scene in The Hate You Give just to get it started, since technically on Goodreads I put in that I started it already. But I don't know, we gonna start. I will not lie, I will start to read it because of the movie. I am someone who enjoys reading books and watching movies. That is why I listen to the Book versus Movie podcast with the two Margos. It's so good. They're so good because they put me onto a lot of books that I want to read now and a lot of movies that I want to see now. Because of them, I want to read The Outsiders. I don't actually want to watch the movie, but I really want to read The Outsiders because I heard it's such a good book, but it's also such a great movie too. But an even better book. So I'll definitely read The Outsiders. And that's about it. So that is it. The next video should be, I guess, at least a progress report on the Hate U Give, or I'll be done with it and be like, yo, I read it. Now I'm gonna go see the movie. Or I'm just gonna go see the movie. And then give like an update on like, read the book and saw the movie and this is how I feel about it. And this is my own book versus movie about it. But I definitely want to hear the Margos on book versus movie talk about this book and this movie because they are really insightful. Like I would love to hear all the research that they give about this book and about this movie. It'll be amazing because they get into their research about books and movies, and I love it. Those are the books I've read, and this is the book I'm gonna read next.